The webinar will begin in just one moment. I just want you to be able to see the link to the live Q&A session, which will be held on January 26th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. You can register for the Q&A at this URL. Hello, and thank you for joining us for this webinar about the Fellowships for Digital Publication Program. I am Megan Brown, a Program Officer at the Division of Research Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities, or NEH. I look forward to telling you more about this program, which you may have heard about before as the NEH Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publication. This presentation will take approximately 30 minutes. If you have any questions, please join us at the live Q&A event on January 26, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. I'll begin by giving an overview of the Fellowships for Digital Publication program and what kind of projects are supported. I will discuss eligibility and what is new in this year's round. Using the review criteria for the program, I will highlight some tips and common mistakes. I'll end with some information about submitting the application, how to find it on our website, and what happens after that. As I discuss this grant opportunity, I'm going to mention the Notice of Funding Opportunity, more casually called the NOFO, a lot. This document can be found on the Fellowships for Digital Publication webpage, and I recommend reading it thoroughly, whether you have applied before or not. The NEH does its grant work through 6 divisions, each focused on a different kind of work or audience. The Division of Research Programs supports the work of scholars, individually or collaboratively, on projects that embody exceptional research, rigorous analysis, and clear writing or communication. The major goal of the Fellowships Program is to support innovative digital interpretations of humanities research. You may have heard of this program as the NEH Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publications. The Mellon Foundation funded this award for 7 years. This year we are running the program on our own as we work on integrating it back into our General Fellowships program. While this means that this is the last year we will offer this special opportunity for digital publication fellowships, please know that digital publication projects are always welcome in our General Fellowships program. The Fellowships for Digital Publication program is an individual award for scholars whose significant humanities projects require digital expression and digital publication. Proposals from all disciplines and fields are welcome. Strong applications make a compelling case for both the humanities content of the project and its digital design. What kind of contribution will your project make to existing research and discourse? Explain why and how digital means enable or enhance your intellectual argument. For example, will you have text that incorporates multimedia components, is shown on existing scholarly platforms, has visualizations or flexible reading pathways? The Fellowships for Digital Publication can fund 6 to 12 months of full-time work. Full-time means that you must devote 100% of your time to the fellowship of your project, free of teaching and other obligations. Your grant period must be continuous. In other words, you can't take a break in the middle to teach or do other work. We accept voluntary drafts of the narrative and work plan sections submitted by February 28th or earlier. I'm going to talk about these drafts again in a few minutes. The deadline is April 17th. Notification is in late December. Start dates can be anytime between January 1, 2025 and September 1, 2025. The Fellowships for Digital Publication program makes about 5 awards per year. Based on the average application numbers, this makes our funding rate somewhere around 15%. Do not let these numbers discourage you. It is a competitive program, but you can't get a grant unless you apply. If you do not get an award the first time around, we encourage you to ask for the panelists' feedback on your application, revise it accordingly, and reapply the next deadline to the General Fellowships program. A new set of panelists will review your resubmission, and they will not know that it has been rejected before. For the NEH, every application is a new application. While the Fellowships for Digital Publication are closely related to our General Fellowships program, there are some differences to the programs and their applications. The product for a fellowship can be a print, digital, or hybrid publication. The applications have different requirements for their format and appendices. Because of the significantly larger number of applications, unfortunately, the fellowships competition does not read drafts. Note that there are also separate deadlines. These are separate competitions, and you may not apply to both at the same time, so we recommend that you carefully consider which is the better fit for your project. The fellowships opportunity deadline is April 10th this year. If you would like to learn more about this opportunity, my colleague Claudia Kinkela will be holding a webinar in a few weeks. The link to her webinar will be available on her fellowships webpage when that program's notice for funding opportunity is posted. Anticipated outcomes for the fellowships for digital publication grants, even if they are completed after the fellowship period, must be published in digital form. They include, but are not limited to, peer-reviewed articles, monographs, websites, virtual exhibitions, translations with annotations or a critical apparatus, digital models or manipulables with interpretive content, or critical editions. What kinds of projects come out of the NEH Mellon program? Here are a few recent examples. Elaine Sullivan, Constructing the Sacred, Visibility, and Ritual Landscape at the Egyptian Necropolis of Saqqara, was published by Stanford University Press and won the American Historical Association's Roy Rosenzweig Prize for Innovation in Digital History in 2020. Henry B. Lovejoy, the Liberated Africans Project, is a website with a large database and analysis. And Whitney Tretien's Cut, Copy, Paste was published through Manifold by the University of Minnesota Press. This is a partial list of projects and activities that the NEH does not fund in this competition. For the full list, see the guidelines document under funding restrictions in section D6. Unfortunately, we cannot fund standalone video documentaries, podcasts, databases, digitization projects, or any kind of other project that lacks an interpretive argument. You must have some sort of analysis involved in your project. We don't fund the research and writing leading to traditional books, or even e-book conversions of traditional books. There has to be something about this project that really requires digital publication. Unfortunately, we cannot fund the development of curricula, teaching methods or theories, or textbooks, or the writing of books for children or young adults. No program at the NEH can fund the promotion of a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view, advocacy of a particular program of social or political action, or projects that fall outside of the humanities, such as creative writing, autobiographies, creative nonfiction, or social science research that does not address humanistic questions and use humanistic methods. Proposals from all disciplines and fields are, however, welcome. We've had archaeologists, historians, literary scholars, ethnographers, and more. We especially welcome independent scholars and junior scholars. You do not have to be affiliated with or on a tenure-track employment by an institution or organization. All U.S. citizens and foreign nationals who have been living in the U.S. for the 3 years preceding the 2024 deadline are eligible. You do not have to have an advanced degree to apply, but you cannot currently be enrolled in a degree program, so with one caveat. For currently enrolled students, if you have satisfied all the requirements for a degree and are awaiting its conferral, you are eligible, but you must include a letter from your dean of the conferring school or your department chair attesting to your status at the time of application, which again is April 17th, 2024. First, as a side point, we are constantly tweaking the application requirements so that we can help people tell the best story about their research. I always recommend reading the new Notice of Funding Opportunity closely. There are a few aspects that I'm going to highlight about this year's competition. The major components have largely stayed the same. A 3-page narrative, a 1-page work plan, a 1-page bibliography, and a 2-page resume. This program also has a required document that the General Fellowships program does not, an important 3-page description of digital project that I'm going to go into more detail about in a moment. The narrative section is limited to 3 pages. This page limit should give you plenty of space to explain both the intellectual work you are doing and its humanities significance, as well as presenting and justifying the digital design of your project. The work plan is a separate 1-page document that tells us what you're going to do during the grant period. We recommend that you start the work plan by telling us where you will be when the grant period starts. Will you have already done some data collection or writing ahead of time? Then break down the grant period into month-by-month chunks. Tell us what you will do during the research period. Finally, you do not have to finish the project during the period of performance. If you will have work left to do after, simply tell us and provide a brief sketch of how you plan to complete the project. This year, one of the larger changes is that we have broken out the appendix so that if you have individual appendix components, they will each be their own attachment. For instance, if you have a translation, you may attach a 1-page translation with a 1-page sample of the original text as one attachment for the translation. If you have a hosting agreement with an institutional host, that itself can be a separate attachment. And likewise, if you're including sample visual materials, that would be 1 page separately attached to the application. See page 9 of the NOFO for the mandatory and suggested page limits for each of these components. The description of digital project design is an attachment that helps your evaluators understand the digital nature of your project. This year, we've shrunk the recommended page length from 5 pages to 3. You are required to include at least one of 3 things, though: wireframes, a sitemap, as example pictured here, or annotated screenshots to help explain the planned structure of your digital publication. Evaluators want to know why digital publication is critical to your project and what functionality you will provide. So we want them to have some examples. If you need some examples of what a wireframe or a sitemap is, I recommend looking at the frequently asked questions document on our website. NEH staff will read and comment on draft narratives submitted before or by February 28th. Please know that we can only comment on 1 draft per person. Email your draft to fellowships@neh.gov and put digital publication draft in the subject line. Do feel free to include the work plan in this document for feedback purposes. Applicants generally find NEH staff comments helpful, but you should know that submitting a draft is entirely voluntary. It is not required and does not guarantee a favorable outcome to your submission. This is what the website looks like for the Fellowships for Digital Publication. You can reach it by simply Googling Fellowships for Digital Publication NEH or going to our main site and browsing the available grants. In the upper right, you will find a snapshot of the grant, including who can apply, the maximum award amount, and the important dates, including the deadline and the optional draft deadline. You'll also see an email address for contacting a grant officer. That'd be me. There is always a real person behind this email, so please do use it if you have questions. Scrolling down the page, you'll find Step 1, Review Your Application Package. This is where the all-important Notice of Funding Opportunity is. This PDF has detailed descriptions of how to apply for this grant, including the requirements for attachments, page limits, recommendations for organizing your narrative, and more. In this area, you'll also find the link to grants.gov, an FAQ document, a list of previous awards, and sample narratives, so you can see how successful applicants have done this in the past. Do remember that we regularly change the NOFO, so take the sample narratives as examples, not the only way to do something. As we move to the application tips, you should start out by thinking about the timeline for your application from submission to notification and plan ahead. The first step is not actually on this diagram. You must begin by registering for grants.gov. If you've never done this before, know that you will need to make an individual profile. Grants.gov otherwise assumes you might be an organization like a major university or nonprofit. Check your account and make sure that you have an individual profile enabled before you apply. I recommend you make your account as soon as possible, as it can occasionally take a bit of time and you don't want to have technical snafu to delay your submission. Likewise, I recommend that you submit your actual application package a day or so ahead of the deadline, so that any last-minute technical glitches do not delay the application. Late submissions will not be evaluated. Submission is by midnight Eastern Time on April 17th, 2024. Peer review panels meet in June. The NEH's National Council on the Humanities, which meets 3 times a year, will review the recommendations in November. The chair of the endowment makes the final funding decisions shortly thereafter, and notifications to applicants are sent out in late December. Please keep these steps and timeline in mind as you plan and prepare your application. Before you start writing your application, your first step should be to study the criteria that we give to reviewers to guide their evaluation of your project. You can find them under section E1, Application Review Information. I highly recommend that you use these criteria to structure and present your project. Starting on page 12 of the guidelines under Attachment 1 Narrative, you will see that each subheading of the narrative and its appendices is keyed to one of the criteria. Make it easy for your reviewers to see how each part of the application speaks to the appropriate criterion, but remember that the criteria can be relevant in more than one section, and that taken together, the parts of the narrative should form a coherent whole. I will go through the individual criteria with some further tips. Writing a grant application is its own genre. It is different from a scholarly essay or an article or a book prospectus, so it needs a bit of strategy. Under the subheading Significance and Contribution, tell your reader in a succinct way what your project is about and why it is important. You should explain what it will contribute to your specific field in a way that a humanities generalist can understand. You should also make clear why digital publication is essential to your project. The application will be more compelling if you can situate your project in the broader context of humanities research and knowledge and maybe use a few concrete examples. Ask yourself, how will my project change the scholarship? How will we think differently? You can take a step back. Does it tell us something larger? Press yourself to see the broader significance of your work for the humanities. One way to stress your contribution is to describe how your work fits in with other work in the field that has addressed the same subject. A short survey of where the scholarship is helpful. Are you taking the research in a new direction? Are you revising a long-held assumption or adding new evidence? So in short, what is unique, important, or new about your project, and how will it enhance scholarship in the field? Generally, peer reviewers find that a well-written, clear application is a predictor of the quality of the planned publication, so writing a good abstract and narrative is important. Remember to stay within the 3-page limit for the narrative and follow the formatting guidance. I recommend avoiding footnotes. They just take up room. The other main components are a 1-page work plan, a 1-page bibliography, and a 2-page CV, and the appropriate separate appendices. Follow the guidelines carefully to ensure that your submission is not declared ineligible on those grounds. Under the heading in your narrative called Organization, Concepts, and Methods, articulate specific research questions and explain the methods, concepts, and approaches that you will pursue to address them. Are you using previously untapped primary sources? Are you proposing an entirely new interpretation of your subject? Are you adapting a methodology from another field? How is the methodology appropriate to the project? Explain the digital methods and the reasons for choosing a particular technology, platform, or software. Where possible, provide an outline of the chapters or sections and the digital publication's design. Be clear about the data that your project will generate or collect and include, if relevant, a statement about public access and any rights or requirements that come into play, such as provisions to ensure the protection of privacy, confidentiality, disability access, security, intellectual property, or other issues. Use your bibliography and appendices to strengthen and illustrate the point you want to make regarding significance, method, and contribution. If you are proposing a dissertation revision, state this clearly and explain the changes, revisions, and explanations you plan, and how they will improve the original work. For editions and translations, digital exhibitions, and digital models, describe the project's scholarly apparatus, such as the introduction, annotations, and paratextual materials. The interpretive nature of your project should be clear. The work plan is a separate document because of its importance to the application process. What will the NEH Award be funding? Provide a detailed work plan in 1-month segments. Be realistic about how much work you can get done during the grant period. Don't overpromise. Be specific and think about what stage your project will be at when the award period starts, which could be 9 or 10 months or more from your application date. State where you are now and project where you're going to be then. You do not need to complete the entire publication within the grant period, but you should provide a reasonable timeline for completion. If you are relying on institutional support or other sources to assist with technology-related work, describe this, the roles of the people involved, and whether funding for this assistance is in place. You should not plan to split a single individual award among several collaborators. If you have an equal partner on the project, you could each submit an application for your own individual award. You may also seek funds as an individual who's part of a larger collaborative project. But in both of these cases, whether you're working with one collaborator or several collaborators, clearly explain how your work will be divided among the group and the extent to which your work relies on another collaborator's contribution. If your project is truly large-scale and collaborative, and you need the funding for a team, you should consider the NEH's Collaborative Grants Program, which has a specific evaluation stream for scholarly digital projects. Applications for the Collaborative Grant Program are due in the fall. Under the subheading in the narrative, Competencies, Skills, and Access, explain how your prior work led to the current project. Emphasize your academic strengths and achievements that are relevant to the present project, and give a realistic self-assessment of your experience with digital humanities. Ideally, the scholarship and technical expertise should be balanced equally, but many people are stronger in one area than the other. Be honest and don't exaggerate. The fellowships want to encourage academics to venture into digital publication and explore its possibilities. Describe what the ultimate digital publication will look like, how it will work and serve the intended audiences, and how it will be disseminated. How can it be accessed? What steps are you taking to ensure accessibility by diverse populations? Who will host it? Have you thought about its long-term sustainability? Mention the expected publication date and publisher if you have one lined up. Reviewers do look favorably on projects that undergo rigorous peer review prior to publication. Do include a URL if one exists, but if you include one, for example, to a GitHub repository or a temporary site, make sure that there is something for evaluators to see when they go to it. Blank sites and links that don't work confuse evaluators. As we conclude, I want to put these important dates in front of you again. When planning your application, remember that the actual start time for your project can be up to 15 months after the submission date. We often have applicants who apply several times before an application is successful. If you do not get an award the first time, we encourage you to ask for the panelists' feedback on your application, revise accordingly, and reapply to the General Fellowship Program next year. A different set of panelists will review the resubmission, and they will not know that this is a returning project. If you are successful, we also recommend that you get your feedback from your panelists. It can help improve your project moving forward. Now, do you have questions? Please reach out to me either at the email address on the slide or come to the live question and answer session on Friday, January 26, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I look forward to hearing more about your project.